And we're back. Yes, we are back. We are back. Welcome back to After Dark. I mentioned that I mentioned that we're going to be speaking to Aaron Kewen, but first I've got on the line Ofel Epicurus. She's done an extraordinary series, A Part of Me, and David Bain, who was on the program just recently, was one of her studies. I believe that A Part of Me has probably had an engagement of in excess of about 500,000 people on Facebook. And Ofel joins me now. Good evening to you.
Good evening, Nick.
Could you tell us about A Part of Me and what gave you the idea to go ahead with this series?
Sure. So A Part of Me is basically a portrait and written narrative kind of project, which means you have one photo of the participant, and next to it you have a story about their condition and where they're at their life right now. What gave me the idea was basically that I had my own experience that made me feel very alone. And one day I stumbled upon somebody else's post and realized that they felt exactly what I felt and went through something very similar to what I went through in my past. And that kind of made me feel all of a sudden that it wasn't that weird, and it just made me feel a little bit better. And I thought sharing people's stories and showing other people that they are not alone in their experience is actually very empowering, because we all have struggles.
Were these people all from Christchurch?
Most of them, yes. I only had one participant so far that is not from Christchurch. She's from the US, actually.
So did you have a psychology background? What's your education?
No, my mother is a psychologist, but you could say that I'm just street smart. I don't pretend to be a psychologist. I'm not there to solve their problems. I am very happy to listen and to try and direct them in the right direction if I have an idea of that.
Now, looking at your subjects in A Part of Me, were there 8 of them?
A Part of Me had, I think, 27 stories shared.
Oh, goodness me!
Far.
Right, 27. Well, look, I had a look at some of them, and they were really harrowing. I mean, it was. I could understand why people wanted to talk about their lives and what had happened to them, but goodness me, it was pretty heavy going.
Yes, correct.
So, is it therapeutic to kind of not confess but to reveal and communicate this? And I imagine people would read it and think, well, actually that's not so far from what I've been through. Is that the idea?
Yeah. So yes, first of all, sharing your story a lot of times is a part of kind of making your peace with it. And also the way the stories are written, there's always something in the end of it that shows how far they've come. So I've heard from participants that the experience was therapeutic for them, and seeing the comments, especially a lot of times with the most difficult stories. We had a story specifically about bullying that was very, very traumatic. And I think for that particular participant, seeing all the support that they were getting was a really good way to see that what they were going through was actually really similar to what others were going through, and that instead of being bullied, they are now being embraced.
So how did you canvass people to find your subjects?
I basically just started with people I knew. The first person was Robert Reed, and through him, because he's very well connected around Christchurch, I started posting on Facebook saying that I'm working on a project focusing on physical and mental illness, and I'm looking for participants to share their stories. And people just come to me.
Did you set yourself a word limit so you'd have an even treatment for each person?
Yes, correct. So the word limit is between 500 to 800 words for each person.
So did they basically, I guess they wrote a submission to you and then you would edit it?
No. No. So the way this is done is that they contact me. I ask them what condition or conditions they want to share with the project. They come for a recorded interview. During the interview, I take their photos. That's how the photos are made.
Oh, right, yeah.
So that's why a lot of them show really raw emotions, because they're actually talking about their actual story. After we're done with the recording, it's usually about an hour. They're sent away. I work on their story. I write the stories. I send it to them to make sure that everything is accurate and they're happy with it. Then it goes to editing and back to them. But I almost always write everything. I only had one participant that had to write their own story because the recording was faulty.
How quick was the reaction on Facebook when you started to publish these?
It's a little hard to remember. It's always, there is reaction and people contact and want to come, but then the amount of people who actually show up is not the same. So the reaction was okay, but you always have some issues. Yeah.
I mentioned, I don't know where I got this figure from, but I thought the engagement was around about 500,000 people. Was that correct?
Correct. So I did the legwork and I went into each photo and I checked the reach, and then I calculated from just the stories, not anything else, just the stories. And it was over 500,000 people.
Now, you'll have looked at the metrics and what have you. This was going around the world, wasn't it? Must have
Correct,
been.
yes.
Okay, were there any particular countries where it engaged more than others?
Yes, so I think the main ones is like the US, UK. Hello? Sorry.
You still there, or you just dropped out very slightly?
Yeah, sorry for that. I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, good. So sorry. So US, UK, New Zealand, in Israel, and then the list is really long. But then it kind of drops in numbers, and you have Netherlands and Philippines and Thailand and France and Germany and all sorts. Yeah.
Have you received much correspondence from people who've looked at the series?
Yes. So I've had people just come forward, either from other countries saying other ways of taking part in the project, etc., etc. People who would like to share those stories, or just people in general saying how this has helped them, seeing somebody else sharing what they feel like.
Could your project attract funding now, given the response to it?
Well, I actually just a week ago, well, not even a week ago, just a few days ago, I received a specific donation from one particular person, and with his donation, we are hoping to go to Dunedin to interview people.
Oh, okay, yeah, because obviously this is transportable. And
yeah.
What are you doing otherwise, apart from this, work that you've been doing, this project? What else are you doing, Ofel?
At this point, I do photography from time to time, but I decided to focus on the project mainly. Okay,
well, look, the other thing I wanted to ask you is, what response have your subjects had personally? What's been their experience of, post-publication?
What I usually hear is just how amazed they are by the amount of people that are supporting them, and basically seeing how many people, can relate to what they've experienced, and, and sharing their story. It's kind of, in a way, you make your peace with it.
I must say, because I did read a few of them, and I'd look at the photograph, and it's a chronicle of it's a chronicle of a very high degree of suffering and pain that's gone on for years and years and years, and you think, goodness me, how's this person survived?
Yeah, but I would probably say that we all suffer in certain ways, and something that I do believe in is that suffering can have meaning, and it can be turned into something good. So yes, for example, a mother that has mental illness, or so, for example, anxiety, and suffered tremendously throughout her years, when her daughter experiences anxiety, she will know how to help her better. So it doesn't necessarily mean if we suffer, and we all suffer in some way, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's all bad. Does
Yeah,
that make any sense?
yeah, no, absolutely. No, of course it does. Hey, look, a fabulous project. David came on, and that's how I learned about your
Mm-hmm.
work. And it's fantastic that you've engaged with us this evening to share your story, about why you've done this amazing project, and we
Yeah.
wish you well with it.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, and have a good night.
Thanks, Ofel. That's fantastic.
Cheers. Bye.
Right, goodness me. Yeah, please do have a look at a part of me on Facebook. As Ofel said, there's about 27 subjects, and you can find out on Facebook what she's been doing. Right, we're going to be speaking to Aaron Kewen next about hospital parking, so we'll be back very shortly.